All right, hey everybody. Are we all settled in? Good to go? Yeah? Okay. Okay, yeah, no worries. It's got cozy. Wow. All right, so first off, thank you so much for being here. This is not what I was expecting. I have so much respect for everybody at this festival, all the speakers, so the fact that there's probably 7 other sessions you could be attending right now that are incredible. Thank you for being here. I'll try to make it worth your while. My name is Mario Vasilescu. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Redefined. And with Redefined, we're actually on a mission to rethink the attention economy. So we're really obsessed with thinking about attention online. Specifically, the core of what we do, for context, is we actually made technology that can tell how focused somebody is on a piece of content. So are you actually paying attention to the content, how intensely, and why? And then we try to reward that and create filters around that to incentivize quality. So for example, one of our tools is called the troll filter. And essentially, once you turn that on your site, it hides the comment section until it sees that somebody gave quality attention to your content first automatically. So you don't have trolls just coming in and leaving knee-jerk comments without even having read your content. So that's what we do, and along the way, obviously by being obsessed with this, we kind of stumbled upon this idea of maybe there being a click bubble. And I first presented it 2 years ago, just the first idea of it. So a lot has happened, obviously, in the past 2 years in the global economy, on the internet, that actually strongly resonated with the theory. So I'm very excited to be able to give you an update on that today, specifically in the context of journalism. And then moving beyond that, what do we do moving forward? So before I go on, I just want to let you know I have really just one goal with this presentation, and that's to give you a boost. I just want to equip you. I know many of the people in this room are already familiar with a lot of the ideas I'm going to present here, and really it's just giving you one more way of articulating them, one more approach and idea, and hopefully giving you, again, a new way to argue for the future, to argue for giving up on the old business model, and again, new ideas for the structure moving forward. So this presentation is in 4 parts. First part, we're going to cover the idea of the bubble. What exactly is a bubble? How is it structured? How do we recognize it? The collapse of the bubble in the context of journalism. Lessons, warnings we can pick up from everything that happened and is happening. And the opportunity ahead, because it's not all doom and gloom. So first off, what bubble? What are you talking about, Mario? What are you talking about with this bubble? So bubbles are things you all recognize. You've seen them in the history books. You've seen them very recently. We had the 1929 US stock market bubble, then the dot-com bubble. We had, obviously, in 2007, the global collapse after the US subprime mortgage bubble. And the argument is that the internet economy is in a click bubble, which is either bursting now in certain layers, I'll explain later, or on the verge. So they're all the same. What it takes for a bubble, so I'll just explain quickly the structure, and then we'll walk through in the context of attention and journalism. So what it takes, if we simplify it, you just first need something that is theoretically valuable and poorly understood. That's the key ingredient. Something that you could argue has infinite value and we're not really sure how to measure it. So, you know, stock market, stocks, dot-com boom, doing business on the internet. Infinite potential. What does that mean? We're not sure. Subprime mortgages. Bitcoin, you could argue. And so what happens when you have something that is theoretically valuable but we don't really understand? It attracts speculators, because obviously they see so much potential, they know people don't really understand it, they can start creating all sorts of schemes around it. And that starts inflating the value. It attracts excitable followers, evangelists of this theoretical value and this hype. And that's why we call it, you know, hype, hot air, things that inflate the bubble. And the bubble is a perfect metaphor, because a bubble is something that seems solid, but is actually hollow and fragile. Now these excitable followers tag on, they start, you know, banking on this hype, and eventually it spills into the mass market. As always, there's laggards, right? The mass market is late, they see this incredible potential, and they want to pile on. And it starts slipping into the mass market, and it starts multiplying and multiplying this false value. Once you hit that point, what typically happens is that companies, industry in general and its clients, sees that this is where the activity is, no matter how dubious, and says, okay, we got to invest in this. This is where everybody is. Look at the numbers. And along the way, what is essential to building a bubble is poor measurement at every step, and extremely questionable ways of quantifying what you're actually measuring and the economic value. And then what happens? You've built this tremendous false value, incredibly magnified, and then pressure starts piling on. Once you've reached the point where the cracks start becoming very visible. First, you have industry doubts. All the people who are pouring money on top start questioning it and starting to pull their money and actually pulling their money. Then you have the media and regulatory scrutiny. Once they've noticed this, it's just a pile on. You can't stop it. It is unrelenting. Governments, media, they don't stop. And finally, along the way, you have mass market dissatisfaction. So all the people who piled on were super into it, hyped up. They suddenly have this wave of disillusionment, and they hate everything about it. And once you do all that on top of this thing that is actually massive, but basically hollow inside and very fragile, you have the burst. Yeah, I figured it's not the most fun topic, so let's add some emojis we can all relate to. So the click bubble. Let's put it in the context of the click bubble. So with the click bubble, it's not so much the value of the internet, because that was really the dot-com boom. This is about the value of attention on the internet. So again, something theoretically valuable seems to have infinite potential, but poorly understood. So back in the 2000s, media director of Sprint, massive telecommunications company, put it really well when he said that the ads on here had the potential to reach TV-size audiences at a fraction of the price. People thought it was going to change everything. And we'll find out why that wasn't the case. So a summary of how we got here. Again, this bubble represents the value of attention online. It's something that's very concentrated, we don't understand it very well, could be very valuable. And the first thing that happens is you assign a rotten core. It's like the core is poor measurement. So we started by saying, okay, the standard measure for this value is going to be clicks and views. So really, what you're doing is you're setting up a very simplistic attention marketplace. And when you do that, obviously, the only way to measurement is through quantity. Quality is irrelevant at that point. When you measure clicks and views, quality is basically immeasurable. You can only do it through volume. And so that's trap number one that journalism fell into that we can all relate to, where quality content doesn't matter anymore because you're just chasing those clicks. So creating great investigative pieces, not really necessary as long as you can just get the clicks. The content takes a backup role. So, okay, we have a simplistic attention marketplace. Well, that's a huge opportunity for these speculators. So that's where the ad networks and ad exchanges come in. Easy to game? Okay, let's automate and scale it. Let's blow this thing up. And they're basically the original click farmers. So if you step back and look at the ad ecosystem, it is deliberately convoluted. It's insane what happens in the middle. That's where all the speculators are. They're just everywhere, milking the system. And there's tons of research that shows you that for $100 put in, somewhere around $40 makes it to the publisher. So over half of the value is just disappearing to these tendrils in the middle. The best analogy I heard about this was when a fairly senior ad executive told me, candidly, that he thinks of it as basically a bunch of octopi piled together, intertwined. You don't know where one starts, you don't know where one ends, you can't separate them. And if you try to explain how they're connected, get one person to explain it end to end, basically impossible. I saw this tweet a couple of weeks ago, maybe you guys did too. I thought it was so appropriate, especially in the context of the click bubble. So if you've seen the movie The Big Short, yeah, feels inevitable. There's going to be a Big Short version of this someday with like Idris Elba in a steam room explaining how external DSPs bid on AdX. Thought that was super appropriate. So we have that. And then you have the poor measurement, the first layer, arguably the second layer. Viewability. How do you measure all these ads? As you know, it's done through viewability. And the Media Rating Council defines viewability as an ad that's 50% in view for 1 second. Check. Which is crazy, because if you think about it, when you're scrolling through a page, that means that when you rapidly rip through a page, and it's just in your peripheral vision, half of the ad, that's enough for bankable value. That's money. Which, that doesn't sound like something you should be banking on. That sounds like false value, especially at the scale we're working at. So that's trap number two. If we're relying on that, user experience doesn't really matter at that point. That's why we saw so many reputable sites breaking up mid-length content into 5 pages. You just wanted those views on the ads that satisfied the viewability. And then user experience takes a back seat because you don't really care, you check those boxes. But you could start there, but that's where the social networks come in. Why not get people to do it for you? Create systems where they can invest and start multiplying this attention and basically create your own self-fulfilling wheel that cranks this out. So just for context, this is based on Facebook's 2018 Q3 numbers. Every month in Facebook's life, they magnify attention into 1.1 million months of human attention. So they're attention merchants, they're attention multipliers, they're attention miners, especially when it's all based on an ad ecosystem that is so simplistically measured. And again, another layer of poor measurement. You guys are, I'm sure, very familiar with this. There's been multiple reports. This one, I think, was the most publicized one, where in 2015, a Facebook video ad manager on the product team said that, yes, when we tell you that a video has been seen in the news feed, we actually just mean it's been seen for 3 seconds. And there's multiple examples of this across the networks. So again, you're putting real economic value at staggering sizes into things that are being inflated with very dubious measurement. Trap 3, relying on false success indicators. This is probably the one I would imagine everybody can relate to in some form in newsrooms everywhere. The frustration of people being obsessed with following metrics that are highly questionable. You know they are, whether explicitly with leaks in the news or because you can just tell that it doesn't make sense. So, next step of the bubble, structure. Big brands and bots piling on. As we know, all companies are now obsessed with social media. Even if the numbers don't necessarily add up, they're getting their marginal returns. That's growing the bubble because they're fueling it. They're putting a lot of money in. But the really important thing is then the speculators on the marketplace. So you can sell, buy, spoof, clicks, views, likes, followers, you name it. It is the ultimate black market. So let's walk through a few examples of that. You can buy, sell traffic through arbitrage. A lot of publishers did this. Some of them still do. How it works, you go and buy a visit for 0.2 of a cent, garbage traffic. Then you list your ads through networks, and you get paid for those ads for 0.5 cent. You do this at high volume, you're making a tidy profit. And at that point, page views is the only thing you care about. And you know it's garbage in, garbage out, but you're making your money. Buy, sell traffic through assignment. This is legal. ComScore allows one property to count another's traffic as its own under a practice called traffic assignment. So you just need to show a relationship between two sites, even loosely. It's usually done through advertising. And that basically allows you to actually claim that traffic as your own. So you could be a site that does 7 million page views a month, and suddenly you're doing 21 million. Again, artificially inflating and validating false value. Website clicks. This is easy. Just go on Google and search link clicker bot or auto traffic generator online, and you will get pages upon pages of cheap ways to drive traffic to your content. Buy, sell engagement. Instagram, Twitter, what do you want? We got it, $149. It's like bidding, $189. Do whatever you want. It's a black market, easy to find, pages of it. This is an example of a click farm, a couple of examples just to show you. So racks and racks, if you haven't seen this, of devices plugged in, all automating the stuff that you are banking on as you do your business strategy. Some of it automated, some of it into central devices that people can easily control. Here's another one. Does this feel like real value? Or something that's wildly overinflated and easy to game at multiple levels? According to this report from 2018, as many as 2/3 of the tweeted links to the internet's most popular websites were shared by bots. Where are the real people? And finally, you have domain spoofing, which I think is the most interesting and devious. What you do here, if you're not familiar with this, if you're a white-collar criminal, because that's basically who does it, you set up a site that's a fake version of a real site. So you might set up cnn.dk, for example. Then you plug into the ad ecosystem, which doesn't catch it in time. And then you buy some of those page views or generate your own through bots to see those ads, and you make money. And as this report a couple of years ago, when kind of is the first popularized one. Biggest ad fraud ever. Hackers make $5 million a day by faking 300 million video views through one of these domain spoofing systems. And the experts said that this is the tip of the iceberg. This is just one example. There's tons of them. And again, you have to remember that example of the octopi plugged together. You'll say, oh, we're not paying for this. We're not going to pay for this. You can't separate out of the ecosystem. If you put the money in, this is what you're paying for if you're banking entirely on advertising and cheap engagement. So trap number 4 is reliance on unreliable revenue, right? This is a huge theme in this conference, has been for years now. How do we move beyond? And that was one of the traps and still is for a lot of people, relying on sources that you should not be counting on because they are very fragile and overinflated. And this is where the pressure starts building on this incredibly inflated economic system. First, you have the original speculators, some of the people who started setting up the foundation of the system, kind of stepping away, starting to question. Sean Parker saying he built a monster. Early Google and Facebook investor comparing the effects to drugs. Ev Williams saying that the internet is broken. In his recent book, Zucked, and through the interviews, he hit the nail on the head. It's not really the social networks, it's the business model that is the source of the problem. So they're coming out and saying it. And then you have the industry doubt. So all these people who are pumping money into the system saying, maybe we won't. Procter & Gamble and Unilever are the 2 largest advertisers in the advertising digital ad ecosystem. So if they pull their budgets, that's just immediate collapse. They didn't do it entirely yet, but it's fascinating to see, especially because Procter & Gamble was doing it because of advertising concerns and the fact that their buyer, so basically the biggest ad buyer in the world, said that it's a fraudulent supply chain. Doesn't buy it. And Unilever wasn't doing it for the ads, was doing it in the context of all the extremism that we're basically supporting through these networks. So they were kind of attacking the whole system. And a lot of examples start cropping up and keep cropping up that it's not effective. The system is not effective. Procter & Gamble did slash their ads by 140 million, and their sales rose anyways. We didn't see a reduction in their growth rate, CFO said. What that tells me is that the spending that we cut was largely ineffective. Chase, American Bank, had ads on 400,000 sites, then just 5,000, same results. My favorite one, which is kind of funny and ridiculous, Restoration Hardware, a big furnishings chain in North America, revealed that after being invested to direct into 3,200 words for AdWords, it turned out that 98% of their online results were coming from just 22. What were those 22? Well, it's the words Restoration Hardware and all the ways to spell it wrong. Right now, digital ad spend is about $320 billion, and it's projected that by 2025, it'll be $50 billion in ad fraud, and today it's already conservatively $20 billion. So 6 to 8% just being siphoned off, and that's conservative. That would not fly in any other system. According to the World Federation of Advertisers, ad fraud is on pace to become the 2nd largest organized crime enterprise behind only the drug trade. No worries. And beyond that, you have the fact that nobody buys into the solutions because this isn't something you can actually fix. Inherently, solutions to this are Band-Aids because the underlying model, the layers of fraud are the issue. So for example, ads.txt, which a lot of you may be familiar with, that was seen as a remedy now for ad fraud. Even the CRO of The Guardian saying very recently that this is sticking plaster to treat symptoms of a market that's distorted by design. And I think this is the best one, straight from the ad tech director of the Washington Post. The numbers are all fucking fake. The metrics are bullshit. The agencies responsible for enforcing good practices are knowing bullshitters, enforcing and profiting off all the fake numbers. Not mincing words. I love it. This cuts to the chase. So that's when it spills into the mass market along the way, right? We are all people. We are all feeling these things. Not one of us can probably say we don't feel these things. First of all, ad blocking. So this inflated value, where is it actually going to go when you have over half of millennials using ad blockers, and 3/4 of people saying that they refuse to use sites that limit their ad blocking. When Google and Apple see this and add their own ad blockers and data privacy features. But more importantly, it's about the awareness of the psychological and social impact it's having on us and the exploitation. So then the headlines start coming, and we all start talking about it. Social media, the new smoking. Studies that apparently show that news is bad for you, and giving it up will make you happier. I mean, these headlines would seem like ridiculous satire because they're so overboard if we didn't know they were completely serious. I mean, like death by information overload. So that goes hand in hand with the perpetual media scrutiny, which we're seeing everywhere. It's not just the headlines, it's the scandals, the investigations, Cambridge Analytica. It seems like there's a new report or something found every week at this point. So just intense pressure, unrelenting. And then most importantly, the sweeping regulation. GDPR, California's version of it, EU copyright directive, Germany just, last week, ruling that Facebook can't keep using its data the way they have on people. Australia passing a law, I think a few days ago, that it's going to punish platforms for violent content. I think CMS MediaWire put it best, you have to wake up and smell the legislation. And so I actually don't believe that there is going to be a violent burst like you see in other economic bubble collapses. I think it's actually going to be a tiered deflation because of how many layers there are to it and how many people are plugged in. But I think you will see it in phases in different verticals. And I think that is what is happening in journalism. You have this industry down now from investors and owners. So you have this freeze on investment after major VC-backed losses, right? You had the Mashable loss. You had Mike, the millennial, for those of you know, the millennial news operation in the US that shuttered, and then the wave of downsizing and losses, right? Like 2017 it started, a couple of months ago, 2,000 jobs lost. These are signs that you would typically see in a system that's hitting a breaking point. And I think this headline in Nieman Lab put it best. In 2009, we said the internet is killing print journalism. Well, in 2019, we say the internet is killing internet journalism. And that fits really well with this idea of a click bubble that has swallowed the internet economy. So, what can we learn from this? What are the lessons? What are the warnings? And I thought, you know, we have to summarize, look back again, the traps. So trap 1, quality content doesn't matter. Trap 2, the user experience doesn't matter. Relying on false success indicators and reliance on unreliable revenue. We can split this up into existing media companies and new media companies. So existing media companies. A lot of people are familiar with some of the stuff I covered, but usually not everything. And usually the feedback is, okay, how can we possibly spend another day in this system? Why are we doing this? And obviously it's convenience because a lot of people are invested in this. There are still marginal revenues to be had. Like I said, it's a deflation. And there's a lot of layers, right? Publishers, agencies, buyers, their clients. So it's very hard actually to pull out and make the case. We know this. But with that in mind, I think it's important to tell a little story about two friends. Their names are Larry Page and Sergey Brin. And as the story goes, it's almost like folklore now, they showed up at Excite. Excite was a search, does anyone even remember Excite? It was a search engine before, yeah, like 2 people. So this was one of the search engines before Google took off. And they went in and presented to the CEO of Excite, George Bell. And the story goes that they did a demo where they put Google side by side with Excite and did a search on both. And Excite's results were full of garbage and spam. And Google's were nice and clean and effective, and you find what you want and you leave. And apparently, the CEO didn't like this actually because he was making money off the early of this bubble, this advertising bubble, and he needed people to stick around and be distracted. So now the question is, who knows Google and who knows Excite now? So convenience is not a business strategy. It never was, it never will be. You're just buying time, rearranging the chairs on a sinking Titanic. The fun side story here is actually they were willing to sell it for $750K, and they wanted to do it because they thought it was distracting from their research, which I just think is like hilarious now. And then the last thing I would say to existing media organizations, which I wish everybody was familiar with, is the law of shitty click-throughs. I want everybody to be familiar with this. It's a term from digital marketing and growth hacking. It's created by Andrew Chen. And what it means simply is that over time, all marketing strategies result in shitty click-through rates. So when it comes to promotion and basically band-aid solutions, which might drive you traffic in the short term, they always taper out. It's not sustainable. Any solution you think is new and novel, but is only for the purpose of getting people's attention, everybody flocks to it, people become desensitized to it, and it always tapers out. This is a law you see everywhere, and it's almost like entropy, like it's just spreading across the internet. And you can't rely on these band-aids anymore, the law of shitty click-throughs. New media companies. You're not special. And what I mean by that, before you get mad at me, is that I think there is a certain exceptionalism right now that's thought of in journalism because we know that journalism is a key aspect of a functioning, healthy society. We don't debate that. But we have to remember that there are limits to the physics of the economy and the number of waking hours. And I think a side of this is how Jeff Jarvis says that we have this idea of news literacy, and it's in publishing, it's the only industry where they expect the user to be educated to use the product. If you're in any other industry, your product sucks. So Derek Thompson put it really well in The Atlantic a few weeks ago. There may be a Malthusian trap in the attention economy. Eventually, revenue growth bumps up against the natural limitations of population and waking hours. And I think we have to remember this, that ultimately, new media startups, unless you're government funded, it is ultimately just another startup in a super saturated ecosystem that has to find a way to survive. And the lean startup model, getting people to buy in early, is super, super important, which we sometimes forget amongst all the hype. And so you're not special, but you totally should be. You should try to be. And I love the fact that I don't even need to tell you this because people who are doing new media ventures are doing an amazing job. There's so many panels and experts here at this conference that show that they're trying new approaches. But I just want to add something in case you're not familiar with it. There's this book called Zag by Marty Neumeier. He also has the book The Brand Gap. And it's just the idea of it. It sounds cliche, but you have this idea of zigging and zagging. And it's just the idea that if everybody else is zigging, you zag. And when you're a super saturated marketplace, we do have to remember that you need to do differentiation amongst, like above everything else. You have to find a way to be different. So, thinking of the way forward, because it's not all doom and gloom, I think that was a good transition with the existing media companies because there's so much amazing work being done right now, which is very hopeful and exciting. If we look at those traps again, how can we create a framework which addresses them directly that we can rely on? And I tried to put something together that includes this, but also takes all the trends that everybody is talking about. So many things that we see at this conference right now. You'll even see some terms that are straight up the headlines of other sessions at this conference. So I put together this sustainable value framework for news. So first, service. And I really want you to think of this as servicing your readers. And saying, you know what, before we said content doesn't matter, content really matters. Quality content matters, and not just yours, but everybody else's, and even when you think of your ads. An example I want to give you, which I love, is Quartz, the Quartz Daily Brief newsletter, which was one of the first before the massive explosion of publisher newsletters, and they did something which was considered basically sacrilegious, which was that they gave half or more than half of the real estate of their newsletter to other publishers. They linked out to other great stuff they found online, which originally was thought crazy, but now everybody's doing it. And that's the idea of service. It's not just that people should rely on you as producing the best content, but you are also the ones who, even if you didn't produce it, will find the best content for your readers. It's this honest, holistic idea of service, and even if you're going to have ads, make them truly useful. Don't abuse the user experience. Which brings us to the next point. User experience does matter. And not only that, but I want to expand that idea, community, and look at the hooked model. How many people here are familiar with the hooked model by Nir Eyal for social networks? Okay, like 3 people, okay. So I encourage you all to look into it for a variety of reasons. Essentially, it's the model that explains why the social networks are addictive and how you can apply it to your own platform to make people stick around. And I'm not encouraging that people should be designing systems for addiction. However, it is an extremely useful system to understand when we think of the fact that it is not okay, and I don't understand when this happened, that apparently it's a platforms world, like the social networks, and the publishers just live in it. You should be able to take these theories and apply them to your site and create a platform of sorts with a real community that can feel like they can invest. I think this is the most important part. It is not enough to just put a glorified comment section. How in the world will you compete with the social networks? It's not enough to have a profile page that is just like their name and some settings. How do you create a home that people can invest their opinion and their identity in? And that leads it to listening, metrics that matter, not relying on garbage metrics. And this ties in so well with so many sessions at the conference today. How do you take that community and let them be part of the news? And how do you look at that information you're getting from their behavior to truly make it count? So measure direct engagement and impact. Not just clicks, not just views, the intensity of attention, the types of reactions you're getting, impact in the news, in communities. Let your audience shape your coverage. Take all that participation and let them get involved. And finally, be thoughtful about it. So right now, it seems like engagement is the new hot term, like giving it different versions, but it's crazy to me that nobody seems to have a single definition. Everybody has their own idea, and they're chasing it like fanatics. And we have to be thoughtful about it, because otherwise we run the risk of letting engagement become the new click, where we don't apply it just to our system, we just do it just because. So we do have to be thoughtful. I think that's extremely important when we're thinking about the bubble. And finally, this one's simple. I don't really have to tell you too much about it, but support. Create a system of reliable revenue where you diversify from advertising, but also empower and give lots of options for people to support you directly in the community that loves what you do. And not only that, but you let people help shape your news, help them shape your business. Give them ways to be evangelists that don't just create linear paths to taking money, but let other people encourage other people to be part of that support. And then rinse and repeat. So once you've done it once, ideally start at listening, and then you work your way through where it is a matter of true service to quality, community that allows people to exist and invest their opinions and identities with you and your community, and then eventually back to support where they can sustain it. So that is the click bubble, how it relates to journalism, what we can hopefully do about it, and I hope I have achieved those goals at the beginning of giving you some more ideas or frameworks that you can take back to your organizations to argue against the fact that we do need to move forward, and we need to do it confidently and boldly, because we can succeed and there are great things we can do. If you want to get the resources from the presentation, you can email me or tweet me. You can find more ideas kind of in this vein, kind of exploring philosophies around the ecosystem at our blog. Thank you for coming. Are there any questions or ideas that you want to share with the room in this context, like things in this vein that you've used in your organizations to make arguments? Yes? Okay.
Oh, me first? Sure. Hi, Sim Blaustein from Bertelsmann Digital Media Investment. So, read a lot about the challenges and issues around ad fraud. And I think undoubtedly a lot of this is true, but at the same time, when you talk to performance marketers, so think online mobile gaming companies or D2C brands that, your Caspers, your Glossiers of the world, they're spending almost all of their marketing dollars on performance advertising, particularly on social. So clearly for them, even despite all of the ad fraud and bot farms out there, they're able to derive, very attributable value. Do you think that's something that sort of eventually suffers from that law of declining click-through rates, or do you think they're an exception?
So there's actually one other form of gaming the system that I didn't put here, which is, if you're familiar with attribution spoofing. Right, so there are other layers where even there you can't necessarily rely on it, because there's ways where you can actually make your ads and the performance marketing seem more effective than it is. And I'm not saying it applies to the whole system, but for example, in Digiday, Confessions of what was it, content executive. You had the one that I think they said they believe that it applies to 40 to 60% of performance marketing. So, I mean, that one's not really reliable as well. And the other thing to keep in mind, I didn't include it here, but it's a quote that kind of is along the lines of, you know, this is a game which is still providing marginal returns and healthy ones for some people, but it is a game of short-term wins. So it depends where you fit into the ecosystem. I'm sure for some brands it's not nearly as urgent for them, depending on how they're doing it. But yeah, I do feel like that system's not perfect either.
Okay, I go with my question. And in your vision,
Yes.
which is the future of Facebook?
Do you want like the honest answer? Because it's kind of crazy. All right, so this is a blog post I've actually been like chipping away at on the side for months. I actually feel, I don't know if they'll do this, but I do think there's a tremendous opportunity for Facebook. If they really want to get back to having people's trust, I think all the investments they've continually made into virtual reality and augmented reality are an opportunity to create the connections between people that they always said was their core. And I think there's a way of monetizing that in a very healthy way at scale. You can imagine paying, you know, for add-ons that allow you to meet face-to-face with somebody in a Parisian cafe or in the jungle. And a lot of product purchasing experiences and commerce experiences you can build around that. So I feel like that is an avenue they could go down. I don't really know how much they would actually do that because they seem to be quite invested in the current model. I do think that outside of Facebook, we do need a system of trust on the internet that doesn't censor people but allows to apply labels to whether you've earned the right to have influence. Not just through having a bot that shares 3,000 things a day, not just by showing up, but for example, validating the fact that you have actually read, you know, 3,000 articles on a subject and you're incredibly well informed and people should listen to you, rather than somebody who just shows up. So I do think there should be a system of consequence and reward. I know that Twitter, for example, is exploring different things. So I do think that should be the future. Where it goes, I'm not really sure. I think people seem pretty obsessed with making the most out of what's left in this bubble. But I do think that would be a set of ways that could be approached for Facebook to be viable long term and have people's trust, and then for the internet to be a bit healthier.
Hello, my name is Terhi Upola. I'm from Finnish broadcasting company from Helsinki. And I'd like to ask about measuring engagement. You and many people here are telling we shouldn't measure clicks or time or things like that, but engagement. But I have no idea how to measure it.
Thank you. So,
what do you
great.
say?
Yes. This is, yeah, so, well, that too, but also, the Facebook blog post is more of a personal one. The company blog post that's coming up is actually literally this. We've been working on building a framework that takes all the definitions of engagement and puts them on one spectrum so you can actually triangulate and see, like, what do these people mean when they tell me engagement across one spectrum. I think, you know, it's really from attention to participation, online to offline. We can map it. But certainly, it needs to be something that has depth. We have another blog post that kind of explains how you can measure quality versus quantity, including the metrics. So is it something that, for example, is binary? So a click is something that is binary. It's on or off. But you can have granular measurements, and the more granular they are, the better you should trust them as being a form of engagement metric, regardless of what your definition is. So like in our case, because we're measuring with a lot of things, the intensity of attention, we can tell you, like, this person was a real person and they were focused. And this piece of the content is driving and anchoring their attention. And that is attention engagement. You can also have participation engagement. So it's something that needs to be unpacked, but I'd love to talk about it after. And also, if you have frustrations with this, you should definitely be part of our blog post. So love to chat after.
Hi, and I'm Van Wijk from Africa Check. Just to be clear, do you include display advertising that news organizations, you know, sell by themselves in this click bubble?
That they sell directly?
Yeah.
Yeah, so direct sales. Yes, if it's running the same assumptions of value that the programmatic shitty stuff is doing. Yeah. But like I said there, I don't think you need to eliminate advertising. As long as you do it for quality and trust and it's valuable, like one of the plugins in our system, again, because we have all this suite of plugins that is basically set around recipes of attention, you have one which is like an advertising module, and it's meant where the the partner you have, the brand partner, proposes it and you can deny it. But it's meant to be very simple, a single line, and it says we endorse this and it's relevant to the content and it's helpful. And so in that point in time, no, I don't think that fits into the click bubble because that is valuable. I can ask you as a reader, and if you set up a poll as well, you can tell them. It's quantifiable, it's trusted. So yeah, I think it's, you know, if you do it poorly, yes, it's part of the click bubble. If you're doing it with integrity and trust, it's not. Sorry, yeah.
I run a radio station, I'm in Jordan, and Ipsos Stats, the only company that does audience research, refuses to ask a question about trust. Which radio station do you trust? Which news program? They only measure audience, reach. How can we get the trust factor in?
You may have seen an article, the other day that talked about Net Promoter Score. So news organizations starting to use Net Promoter Score on their users to quantify it that way, so you kind of do it separately. And I think other ways are to ask them. Again, we have plugins other people do where once you've noticed they're an engaged reader, how do you feel about this? Do you trust what we do? And then take the data that comes from your most, you know, intense audience that truly is with you and find out there, and then you can publicize those numbers. You don't need to rely on everybody else who's doing just the volume. Yeah. Yes?
Yes, I have a question about your society redefined. What is it selling and to whom concretely?
So basically at its core, again, because we measure attention in a kind of a new way, very intensely, we take all the factors you typically get in different platforms like heat maps and time and depth and whatnot, and we put them into one algorithm which also uses AI. So we'll, like, if you have an infographic, we'll understand whether the person actually looked at the infographic as long as they should have. It's not a picture of a person. And then we use machine learning to continually improve, and we have a lot of data around this. So that's what we do, and then we provide you insights, better insights around engagement. But most importantly is that we provide these plugins. They're like a suite of plugins. They can turn on and off around attention. It's like if this, then that for attention and participation widgets. So that's where the troll filter comes in. You turn it on and you say, if the person doesn't hit 70% focused attention, I don't want them to see my comment section. And the main thing we do, which is launching in September, one of these plugins is called Redocracy. And effectively, it allows you to turn on a social layer in your site that lets people get credit for their verified attention. And then it dictates how people connect to each other in the system. So if you have a comment section, everyone can comment, but it's going to feature the people who are truly well-informed and trusted. And people can use this across the web, and that data comes to you as a publisher, and you know who's trusted, who's well-informed, who's passionate about certain subjects. And it's all public. People get to own their data. It's a very healthy win-win approach. So yeah, basically a data platform that is all about quality engagement and incentivizing quality engagement. Anybody else? And also, please email me if you have any questions or, you know, you have ideas. Please get in touch. Good? All right. Thank you, everybody.